Derek, thank you so much for coming on the show. Great to meet you. Great to have you here. You are the CEO of IDEO. Tell us about IDEO and how you became CEO.
Thank you, first of all, for inviting me onto the podcast. IDEO is a design and innovation company. I suppose our mission is to create disproportionate impact through design. And so we spend a lot of time with clients looking at the future and where they want to be and kind of helping them design outcomes and products and services and sometimes organizations to allow their business to grow. I kind of spent most of my time in advertising. So I've spent probably 36 years in advertising prior to coming to IDEO. A different type of creativity, but still in the creative business. In part, I came to IDEO because I think it's maybe the most creative company in the world.
Interesting.
Yeah, we work on so many different things. I mean, we've been around a long time, around for 40 years. We design everything from physical products and services all the way through to designing strategies for companies and then into organizational change. So, for example, last year we were working on how do you collect poop?
Are you kidding me? Really?
Yeah, how do you collect poop for obviously medical purposes, all the way through to how do you redesign a government? So that's quite broad, and so you tend to find when you kind of come into any IDEO office and you go into a project room, it's sort of like wandering into a mixture of Pixar meets a kind of teenager's bedroom, and there's prototypes of things on the floor and foam core and sticky tape, and it's just so amazingly eclectic. That's kind of exciting. It's exciting to be around people who spend their whole time thinking about new ideas. It's kind of quite electric.
Yeah, that's incredible. So everything starts with design?
Yeah, we kind of looked through a kind of, that's sort of the toolkit that we use. I mean, obviously, we've been around a long time. We're kind of the people who are most associated with design thinking and human-centered design. So most things start with people. What do people want and need? And then we kind of build our solutions from there. That's sort of how it evolves. But we use the tools of design to help us along the way. And that's been our business for 40 years.
How do you choose the clients you work with? Because I imagine you can work with almost anybody at this point.
Well, I think it's interesting. When I came into the business, 21 months ago, I used to play this game with different IDEO people of trying to find a company that we hadn't worked with. Like that game you play with. Can I get a search term on Google that has not been seen before? So you'd go, right, well, you can't have worked with this person, so you'd name a company, and they go, oh no, we've worked with them. We've worked with literally everybody. I think the truth is we kind of like problems. We're more attracted to problems than we are necessarily to sort of brands and businesses. We like a gnarly problem, Clint. That's what we kind of dine out on, is like something that's really complicated. That's sort of become where the business is you tend to be dealing with clients that have quite sophisticated and thorny problems. And that's where we kind of are at our best. And that's the nature of way that we work. Is we work sort of often in 12 to 16-week project cycles, small teams of people, 100% of their time dedicated to really understanding a problem and getting under the skin of a client's business, really spending time with their people and with more importantly, the people who use the products and services that we might be designing for. So you really get a real understanding of what's going on. Often, sometimes at a level that maybe the client hasn't even seen before. And obviously we've got lots of experience from different categories which we bring to bear. So I often say that an IDEO project team is the start of a joke. There's an ethnographic expert with an industrial designer meets somebody who used to be supreme on the poker network, meets somebody who's an ex-client, and those people will be the people that will help you solve a problem. And it's, in a way, that's been the secret, is the kind of eclectic nature of the people who work here. Very diverse backgrounds, very different. That's the thing that gets you to the answers. Yeah, we have a really solid and interesting and well-designed process, which we're known for, but it's the individuals. It's the alchemy of the individuals and their backgrounds that makes the business, I think, exciting and different.
How do you hire and cultivate that talent?
Well, we hire from everywhere. It's important to us that we have kind of diversity, not just in kind of the makeup of the people, but also in different backgrounds. So we have people who've been management consultants, we have people who've been clients, we have people who have, like PhDs in design research, we have industrial designers, we have UX people. So we kind of are looking for people who have quite diverse experiences. And then when they come here, then we train them also in the way that we do things, because obviously we have a particular way in which we go about the process of creating and designing things for our clients. So in a way, it's the eclectic nature of who we hire, the backgrounds of those people, that is really the special sauce that makes the. And there's some of the most amazing people I've ever worked with in my entire life are here. They're always tinkering, it's always one of those things, right? We've got a shop downstairs with sort of machines that could saw bits of your body off if you wanted to. It's like really, and there's always things happening down there. You stick your head around the door and you kind of see things being created and made, and you're like, okay, wow, I wonder what that's for. And that's kind of exciting. It's like it's like Willy Wonka, but for design. And because we don't design just one thing, the output of the company is incredibly varied. And, that's exciting.
What does a typical day look like for you?
I do a lot of Zoom calls. I do a lot of Zoom calls because, obviously we're an international business. So sometimes, the morning starts with Europe and the day ends with conversations with Asia. And then, you'll often be in meetings like planning for various, it could be a new business prospects, talking to a client, could be prepping for an actual meeting. And along the way, we have all the sort of normal obligations that CEO has for, finance and HR and all the stuff that's going on inside the business. And then, you kind of wander in and out of offices looking at work and what people are up to. And no 2 days are the same, ever. Really ever. And that's the thing that makes it interesting, because the projects that we're working on are so varied and so different. And so, different offices are working on different things, because some offices have certain skills in certain areas versus other offices. So each office is different, not only different in obviously the personnel that work there, but also the things that we're working on. It's a bit like walking into, it's a bit of a treasure trove every time you go to a new office, because there's always something new that's happening that you haven't seen before. And also I'm still, candidly, I'm relatively new still, so I'm still learning about design. So everything is still to a certain extent quite new. And of course, then we have the obligations of the people who own us and making sure that they understand what we're doing. Yeah.
What are you thinking about AI? How is that going to change design?
We have an emerging tech lab, and we've been working on AI in its different iterations probably for 8 years. We wrote a kind of an ethical guide to AI 8 years ago. We have an emerging tech lab that spends half of their time in research and development. So we are playing and tinkering with AI on our own projects, but also, starting to think about how that technology might be applied for clients. So half the time in R&D and half the time, working with clients on problems. And I think it's fair to say in the last 12 months, we've seen more projects come to us that have an AI lens. It's one of the only areas, I think, where pretty much every company is looking at it in some shape or form. Mm-hmm. So when I took over running IDEO, one of my big clients was Jim Hackett at Ford, the former CEO of Ford, and he's kind of a good friend of David Kelly, the founder of IDEO. And I met him, and he kind of was really clear. He said, AI is the one area, he said, pretty much every CEO has got questions about. And he said, I think it would behoove you to kind of look very carefully at what you know and understand as a business and how you can help clients, because the technology will be quite, we can see it's obviously the thing that everybody's talking about, a little bit like everybody talked about digital in the early 2000s. That was, another area where everybody got super excited. I think this is probably going to be more profound. So we are working on a number of projects at this moment that all involve AI. And we spend a good time tinkering with AI and using AI. And in project work, I think as time goes on, I think we will see that actually understanding how humans really use the technology is going to become more and more important. I think in the moment we're all sort of excited by the technology, mm-hmm. But then we have to find ways that it can be applied and that people will work with and use it There's the technology is nothing if it doesn't get used. So I think that's some of the things that are happening now. There's sort of excitement is there, but actually how are we really going to use it, and how are we going to develop the technology so we feel comfortable in using it?
Right.
And that is sort of some of the conundrum is we've built this technology, companies have built this technology at great expense, but actually what is it going to be used for, and how are we going to make it so people want to use it and it's used in a way that feels natural to the way in which people want to use technology. That I think is a big, that really we're only just scratching the surface of.
Yeah, it's so interesting how AI is going to affect every industry. Like I would have never guessed that it would affect something like a design, like something like so creative, right? But it does, and you got to like think about it and figure out the best way to utilize it within your company. What about leadership? How do you think about leadership? What are some key traits of a leader, or even things like self leadership? Like how do you lead yourself? We talk about that a lot.
It's interesting. I think the only time one really thinks about leadership is when somebody asks a question about leadership. And you go, oh gosh, I wonder how I lead. I think, one of the things I suppose I would say, having run a number of different creative companies, prior to IDEO, I ran a British advertising agency called Bartle Bogle Hegarty, and then an American advertising agency called Goodby Silverstein and Partners. I think in part, the thing that you learn around creative businesses, creativity, in order to thrive, it needs to feel safe, and you need to create an environment of trust. What that leads to is you have to create room for things that feel counterintuitive in other businesses to sort of take place. So you have to leave room for people to be curious and to be inspired. And often that means that doesn't happen in your office. Those moments happen outside of your work environment. It means breeding an environment where it's really okay to fail. I mean, the thing that I would observe here is one of the things that we do really well is we start designing and prototyping whatever it is from day one. It's almost like you give us a problem and the first thing we'll do is go, okay, what do we think the answer is? And we might even sketch that, we might design it, we might prototype it into something that is very, very rough and ready. And that is the start of a journey. In order to do that, you have to feel safe that you can do that, and it might be completely and utterly wrong. I think the best creative environments allow people to play, where people feel it's okay to share ideas. And I think there is something here which is quite unusual in a creative company, is we're quite generous in the way in which we will kind of trade ideas amongst ourselves, but also with the outside world. We publish and we teach the way in which we think about the world. That in part, I think, comes from David Kelly, who was the founder, who also went on to found the D School at Stanford. Is that sense of generosity is really important in creativity, is like the ability to think through a problem and generate a lot of ideas. The best and the most prolific creative people, they generate a volume of ideas which is sort of quite staggering, and they're quite prepared to give them away. It's quite generous, and it's sort of, in a way, it's quite karmic. Like if you're giving away a lot of ideas tend to come back to you. And I think that's super important if you want to lead a creative business, is you create the conditions for those things to happen. And sometimes that means you have to trust people that they will find their way to do it rather than impose your will upon them. When you do that, creative people tend to be less excited about whatever it is that you're saying. And I think that's important. Like, you have to let people, have a certain degree of freedom if they're going to do great work for you.
What is it about London? Tell me about where you're at and the creative environment that is, and just kind of the capital, of creativity, at least in Europe. It's either London or Paris or something, tell us about London. What should we know about London?
Well, it's interesting because obviously now I live in San Francisco, so I kind of have a perspective on London which is slightly different than when I worked there.
Mm-hmm.
I think London is really powerful creatively because it is a sort of melting pot. Even though we're not in Europe anymore.
Yeah.
That's a different podcast, Clint. That's not.
Yeah.
I think you have a mixture of different people from different places, an incredibly vibrant art, very vibrant design, advertising, music. It's a place where kind of lots of things are being created. As a result of that, there's sort of quite a lot of clashing of points of view. So it's one of the greatest places. Like if you can walk out of we've got an office in the east of London, you can walk out and within 10 minutes you can be somewhere that's really inspiring. like genuinely inspiring. The museums, art galleries, and also like it's a great city to watch people. It's like
Hmm.
all big capital cities. Like, there's something I'd really love, which is just to watch people. Watching people is like the observation of people and what they do is actually so important to how we make things. Like people have little tells. You go, wow, I didn't know that somebody did that, and that becomes something that's really important. But it's also, I think, a city that is unapologetic in thinking it's the best city in the world.
Yep.
There's a bit of like, when I worked there, I thought that we were the center of all things that were great in advertising. And that probably wasn't true, it's being really honest, but it felt like it. It felt like we were working on important things. And, there's a very rich kind of art school community in London. So, particularly in the creative professions, there's great universities, great colleges that kind of literally spew out lots of different kind of people with lots of different backgrounds. And it's one of the most international cities in the world. And then people get sort of seduced by these rather ridiculous English accents that real great intellect, if we're being honest.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's certainly an advantage. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
I feel smarter just talking to you. Honestly. Like,
That I have a feeling that's going to disappear. This is a bit like chewing gum. It's going to disappear quite quickly at the end of this interview.
what about San Francisco? What have you learned about San Francisco, which is known as kind of like the technology capital of the world, and obviously an epicenter for industry and business in the United States and around the world as well? What have you learned since you moved there?
It's a very interesting city, San Francisco, because in a way, it's sort of a one industry city. It really
Mhm.
is dominated by technology. There really is that sense of the things that are really important in the world are being created here. And, in my time, I've kind of lived through social media and obviously the growth of the big tech companies around that. And in this moment, obviously, we're in an AI bubble. And you really do feel like all the major big innovations are happening not far from where you are.
Mhm.
Now, I suppose in my prior life, because a lot of those businesses had some kind of advertising component, particularly Google and Meta and people like that, you would meet those people quite regularly because they would want to come and talk to you about the products that they created and what that might mean for advertisers. But it is a city which is obsessed with things that are new. Obviously, there's a massive venture capital community here too, so there's a lot of kind of money here too. And it's a very interesting, if you sit in a cafe quite close to the office here, you can hear some of the most ridiculous conversations you're ever going to hear in your life.
Yeah.
You're like, okay.
It certainly has that.
Yeah, it has that sort of sense of people here believe that they're changing the world.
A couple of them are, for
Yeah,
sure.
some are, but many are not.
Yeah.
But that's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
it is a fascinating place. I will say that.
How do you stay grounded? Like, how do you focus on yourself, your mental health, all of that type of stuff?
I think you have to sort of, like, first of all, I'm lucky that I'm in one way because I'm British. I'm already half empty. So, like, I come into circumstances where I kind of like, I have a little bit of, I'm always suspicious of overt optimism. And it's been a really interesting being here at IDEO because IDEO is an incredibly positive place, like full of optimism. Everything is, like we lens through positivity. And there are times where I'm like, wow, this is so positive. Can I stay this positive? I think, look, the truth is, like, being a CEO is like being an ultra marathon runner. You have to plan really intentionally how you are going to do these kinds of jobs because they are so draining. And I try and kind of mix up the work itself with space for myself to step outside and regenerate, do things that I want to do. This is really important. Sleep is really important. I've got a friend who coaches professional triathletes. He kind of, I suppose, he believes that like CEOs and C-suite executives are like elite athletes. You need to do all the things that elite athletes do. You need to eat properly. You need to sleep properly. You need to spend time kind of learning and educating yourself. You need to regenerate, and you need to be physically fit. Otherwise, you just can't do the work. And I think there's so little attention paid in those areas to kind of people who do these kind of jobs. It does lead to questions about what is the C-suite going to become and what is the role of the CEO as we look into the future. Is it going to be this lone person who is at the top of a a company making decisions in a godlike manner, or is it going to change over time? And I personally think it has to change. The role is, and the issues that people are dealing with now are so complicated that you can't. It's not a job that can be done solo. You're going to need help. You're going to need support. I think the role of a CEO is going to change quite profoundly as a result of that.
How are you thinking about like the macroeconomic environment, just the macro environment in general? And how are you thinking about as the CEO of your company? Because like CEOs are now being looked to comment on things outside of their own company, outside of their own industry. Like people are looking to leaders with so much lack of trust in other areas of society. They look to CEOs for leadership, which is probably a really interesting thing for you. How are you thinking about it?
Well, I think, it's looking at the economics is always quite hard because it's sort of like you pay too much attention to it, you can get freaked out really quickly. I mean, I think there's just the general shape of how does the economic environment look, long term? What does it look like in different environments? And obviously we've come through a period where for a long period of time, money was free, really. And so people took advantage of that to invest in all sorts of different things. And that was obviously incredibly helpful to our business because people were spending that money on design and develop and innovate in new ways. And then obviously when, money is not free anymore, then that does put downward pressure on a business like ours. And so you have an eye on it all the time, but you can't become too fixated about it because there's nothing really that you can do about it. But I think you're right. I mean, I think there is at a time when there's more trust in institutions outside of government than there is for the governments themselves. And in part, that's to do with the leadership of some of the people who've been running governments and across the world. And in some cases, it's because, there are businesses that have taken on a much wider remit and responsibility. And in some cases are way bigger financially. You look at the size of the biggest corporations in the world and they're bigger than countries. So
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is. It's crazy. Yeah.
Like Rockefeller would be freaking out, like how much control over these companies, like all these companies that got busted up, and because we were too freaked out back then. Now they'd be like, whoa, why haven't you done that here?
Well, there are a number of things. I think we both know what they are. There are a number of things, particularly in the tech space, where you go, it's probably time for you to get broken up a bit. And that will probably happen over time. And that will be good. That will bring innovation as we bring more competition around. So, yeah, I mean, I think the truth is corporations and the people who run those corporations are being asked to look at things that they weren't asked to look at before. And, it's not just about making money anymore. It's about how do you make your money, and in what way are you making your money? And what are you doing to the planet? How are you engaging employees? Do you have a diverse workforce? Are you inclusive? Do you have a sense of belonging? Like all of those things are so critical to how you run a company, and as they should be. Mm-hmm. But in a way, it's not just enough for a corporation now to make a ton of money. That's one barometer, but it isn't the only one. And obviously, people have lots of opinions about companies that make a lot of money but aren't doing particularly wonderful things for the environment or for society. That's when they come under pressure.
Yeah.
And that's probably not what the CEO 70 years ago had to worry about.
Yeah, for sure. I can't imagine they did.
Yeah.
I can't imagine they thought about it once.
Yeah.
Derek, finally, we end every interview with the same question, and that is at CEO.com. We believe the chances one gives is just as important as the chances one takes. When you hear that, who gave you a chance to get you to where you are today?
Well, I'll start out with a story. So when I was trying to get into advertising, I wrote 175 letters to advertising agencies in the UK. I got 95 rejections, a lot of rejections on one day, and I got 2 interviews. And one of those interviews was a company called Ogilvy and Mather Direct, which was a direct marketing company, part of the Ogilvy and Mather advertising empire at the time. And there was a man there called Rod Wright who gave me. I mean, I was not central casting, so I'd not been to university. I just turned 20. I mean, I got carded everywhere I went. Like I could go past a pub and people would like, "Can we see your ID?" So, and he took a chance on me. And ever since that kind of day, I've felt like in everywhere I've worked, when I've got into a position where I can affect some change, worked hard to kind of pay that back. I started an apprentice program when I was at Silverstein and Partners. We started a school, nothing to do with me. I just helped support the school there. It could be for underrepresented kind of communities to learn about creativity, and rather than paying like $60,000 to go to a college. We paid nothing, and we
Mm-hmm.
taught them in the evenings and alongside people who were working in the industry, and that was incredibly powerful. Again, not my idea, but something that I supported, and I think actually, like I do. One of the things that's happened to me since I've been in America, I think, is that sense of kind of the karmic element, which I would have probably dismissed if we're still in London. I think is really true. Like if you do something good for somebody, they do something good for you, you pay it forward. That's profoundly powerful. And I wish more people did that. I mean, just sometimes just asking somebody for help, very simple thing to do, which I don't think we do enough in business. Is like, one of the things that's really interesting about this place is we work together as a kind of as a group. No one person goes, I did this. Derek did this, not Clint. No, that's just not how it works. And that sort of sense of generosity and kind of openness to help others, I think, not only makes a great company, but I think makes kind of a great society. And I think if we did that more often and we really listened to what people are asking for, I think we could probably make countries that we live in better.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. Derek, thank you so much for coming on. Seriously, what an
Very well.
honor.
Thank you very much, Clint. Really enjoyed it. Thank you for inviting me.